There is a place in every grown child where the mother still lives, not as a woman, not as a saint, but as a presence that shaped the very bones of your being. And some of us were raised in the arms of a woman who was too broken to hold us. But let me tell you, healing is not found in blame, it is found in brave truth. This is not a speech to condemn your mother. This is a reckoning with the shadow you've tried not to name, because as long as you refuse to look back, your heart cannot move forward. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you will not only understand your pain, you will reclaim your power. There are silences so loud they shake the soul, and some of the loudest sounds a person will ever carry are the ones they were never allowed to speak. What happens to a child who learns early that pain must be swallowed whole, without question, without witness, without name? What becomes of the heart that was taught to smile through sorrow and call it obedience? There are wounds that form not just from what was said, but from what was never said. From love that was supposed to be unconditional, but came with strings tied to silence. From the kind of mothering that made you question not just her love, but your own worth. Some were raised in houses filled with words, but devoid of tenderness. Some were given rules, but no refuge. Fed, but not felt. Guided, but never grounded in affection. And yet we're told, be grateful. She did her best, and maybe she did. But that doesn't mean it was enough to make you feel whole. Gratitude and grief can exist in the same breath. You can honor the life she gave you while also acknowledging the love she could not. But oh, the world doesn't like that kind of truth, does it? The world wants you to write her a poem on Mother's Day, post smiling pictures online, and call her an angel no matter how much your spirit still trembles when she calls your name. It wants you to skip over your sorrow, dress your trauma in respectability, and confuse self-betrayal with loyalty. But let me tell you something no one said loud enough. Your silence will not save her, and it will only hurt you, because what you do not speak, you still carry. And what you carry without light, you will pass on without knowing. It shows up in how you love, how close you let people get, how quickly you flinch at kindness or mistake chaos for chemistry. It shows up in your voice, when it shakes in confrontation, when it stays quiet, even when your soul is screaming. And it shows up in the mirror, especially when you swear you'll never be like her, and yet you find her habits living in your hands, her rage creeping behind your eyes, her dismissiveness echoing through your tone. You cannot heal what you won't name, and no wound disappears because it was denied. You see, silence becomes its own kind of sickness. It festers, it molds the memory, it dulls the clarity you need to move forward. And over time, it convinces you that your version of reality is too dramatic, too sensitive, too much. But the wound doesn't lie, the ache doesn't lie, the fatigue in your bones when you think of going home, that doesn't lie. It's not about blaming her, it's about liberating you. You were once a child who needed to be seen, heard, held, and if she could not do it, if she withheld it, neglected it, mocked it, then that truth deserves a voice. It does not mean she was a monster, it means she was human and she hurt you. Both can be true. There is power in saying, she hurt me. She didn't mean to, maybe, but she did. And I have the right to feel that. I have the right to heal from that. You have the right to your full experience. Not the sanitized version others are comfortable with. Because when you speak it, when you tell the unspoken truth, you begin to gather the scattered pieces of yourself. You begin to make sense of the triggers, the patterns, the fear. You begin to forgive, not as a gift to her, but as a mercy to yourself. Not everyone will understand this. Some will try to shame you back into silence, but remember, their comfort is not more sacred than your healing. When you finally let the truth rise out of your bones, trembling, raw, and real. There will be no thunder, no applause, just a deep, almost holy exhale. And in that breath, the echo will soften, the silence will release, and the child inside you will finally feel seen. You are not disloyal for telling your truth. You are not cruel for needing to heal. You are not broken because she could not love you the way you needed. You are rising, and your voice is the sound of your becoming. There is a story they hand us early, sometimes before we can even speak. A story wrapped in lace and lullabies. A story that says a mother is always good. And so we begin our lives believing. We believe that mother means safety, that mother means softness, that mother means home. We are told she is the first love, the divine figure, the earth and sky and heartbeat wrapped in human skin. But what happens when your first love doesn't love you in the way you needed? What happens when the arms that should have held you felt like cages? When the words meant to guide you came out sharp like knives? When the smile she gave the world never quite reached you? Still, the myth insists she is your mother. She did her best. And so you suppress. You smile through it. You fold your truth inside your ribcage like a hidden note, never meant to be read. But let me tell you a truth that doesn't get embroidered on pillows or spoken in Sunday morning sermons. Not all mothers are mothering. Some birthed children before they had birthed wholeness in themselves. Some gave life, but never learned how to give love that didn't wound. Some carried trauma like second skin and handed it down like tradition. And it's not hatred to say that aloud. It is clarity. It is freedom. Because pretending she was perfect will not protect you from the ways she hurt you. We've been taught to put her on a pedestal so high our pain is too ashamed to climb. We're told that good daughters and good sons do not speak ill of the woman who bore them, but what of the ones who were not kissed, not comforted, not believed? What of the children who grew up in the shadows of her storms? There is no virtue in lying to yourself to protect a fantasy. The world may not want to hear it, but we must say it. A mother can be sacred and still deeply flawed. A mother can mean well and still cause harm. A mother can be everything to the world and still not enough to you, and you are not selfish for noticing that. You are not dishonoring her by naming the gaps. You are not ungrateful for admitting you were hungry, for attention, for affection, for something gentler than survival. We need to shatter the porcelain image of the perfect mother, because that image doesn't help us heal. It doesn't hold us through the nightmares or explain the void that still shows up in the middle of joy. It only makes us question ourselves. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I'm the problem. But no, my dear, you are not the problem. You were just a child in need of care, and you were met with a woman who didn't know how to give it. Maybe she tried, maybe she didn't know better, but your body still remembers what it didn't receive, and your spirit still aches from the expectations it was never allowed to speak out loud. This myth of the perfect mother, it doesn't just silence your pain, it delays your healing. Because how can you forgive a wound you weren't even allowed to admit existed? Let's be honest, not every mother was a villain. Some were simply lost. Wounded girls in grown bodies doing what they could with what they had. But that doesn't mean their children came through whole. And it is not betrayal to say, she was broken, and her brokenness broke parts of me too. When we hold on to the myth, we force ourselves to love an illusion. But when we begin to see the woman for who she truly was, not as a goddess, not as a demon, but as a human being, we start to release the grip of confusion. You don't have to make her evil to make your pain real, and you don't have to make her a saint to love her. You are allowed to hold both truths. I love her, and I am healing from her. That is not disloyalty. That is maturity. That is truth. And truth is the only thing strong enough to carry the weight you've been holding in silence. You were not born to uphold a myth that denies your own story. You were born to live fully, to feel freely, to break cycles, not just survive them. And so you must unlearn the lie that says love means pretending. Love, real love, lives in light, and your truth deserves light. There is a kind of childhood that looks whole from the outside. Clothes were clean, food was on the table, the house was standing, the school attended, the birthdays remembered with a cake or a card, and still something inside you aches. Still there is a shadow you carry, a silence in the heart that has never quite been filled. Because survival and love are not the same. Survival says you lived. Love says you were cherished. There is a difference between being kept alive and being made to feel like you mattered. Some mothers raised their children like obligations. They made sure you had enough to eat, enough to wear, enough to get by. But they never sat close just to feel your presence. They never touched your face gently just because it was yours. They never said, I see you. Not the grades, not the chores, not the smile you practiced, but you. There is a difference between function and affection, between duty and devotion, between raising a child and nurturing a soul. Some children grew up in households where their basic needs were met, but their emotional needs were dismissed, minimized, or mocked. They were told they had everything, so they must not complain. But a full stomach does not heal an empty heart, and a roof over your head is not a reason to ignore the ache that lived beneath it. And so many walk this earth unsure of why they feel fractured, why closeness feels foreign, why comfort makes them flinch. Because they never knew tenderness in its purest form. They only knew caretaking dressed up as love. They only knew emotional distance wrapped in sacrifice. They only knew a version of parenting that was about endurance, not intimacy. And still the world says, but she took care of you. What more do you want? As if survival were the peak of motherhood. As if the bar should be set so low that breath in your lungs is supposed to cancel out the tears you cried in silence. But what you wanted, what you needed, was something softer. A gaze that didn't carry criticism. A hug that didn't come with a sigh. A word that lifted instead of pushed. You needed to be chosen, not tolerated. You needed to be celebrated, not managed. You learned to adjust yourself, to shrink when you should have soared. You learned that pleasing her kept the peace, that dimming your light made you easier to love, or at least easier to be around. You learned to survive. And because you learned so well, you began to confuse survival with love. Now, in your relationships, you find yourself grateful just to be chosen. You tolerate coldness. You excuse distance. You explain away disrespect. Because deep down, something in you still believes that being tolerated is the same as being loved. Because deep down, you think the absence of harm is the same as the presence of care. But love is not just the absence of punishment. Love is the presence of presence. Love is attention. Love is warmth. Love is remembering who you are even when you forget. And what you needed back then, and still deserve now, is not to simply survive in someone's orbit, but to feel the fullness of being seen and held. She may have done her best, but if her best taught you that love must be earned through perfection, silence, or self-sacrifice, then her best still left you with a burden. And your healing requires acknowledging that. No one is asking you to throw stones, but healing begins where truth is spoken. And the truth is this: you needed more than food. You needed more than shelter. You needed more than being told, I kept you alive, didn't I? You needed love that looked like care without conditions. Love that made you feel safe to be your full, flawed, radiant self. Love that asked questions and stayed for the answers. Love that didn't withhold when you disappointed her. Love that held you closer when you cried instead of telling you to be strong. You deserved a mother who knew how to give that. And if she didn't, you deserved the right to grieve it, not in bitterness, but in truth. Not in blame, but in clarity. Because only when you stop mistaking survival for love can you finally start choosing real love for yourself. Only then can you begin to ask for more and believe you were always worthy of more. We grow up thinking we will never become them. We swear it, whisper it to ourselves in the quiet corners of our rooms. I'll never talk to my child that way. I'll never ignore someone I love. I'll never let anger sit at the dinner table like a guest of honor. But life has a way of circling back. Wounds have a way of echoing through time, repeating in our mouths, our hands, our choices, until we stop and ask, where did I learn this? We look in the mirror one day, not the one on the wall, but the one in the soul. And we see them, the same tone, the same avoidance, the same flinch in our children's eyes that once lived in ours. It is one of the hardest truths to swallow, that what hurt us might now live in us, not because we're cruel, not because we've forgotten, but because the cycle repeats until someone is brave enough to break it. Patterns do not die in silence, they hide in silence. They sneak their way into how we love, how we fight, how we leave, and how we stay. They sit quietly in the background of our lives until something small, something familiar, sets them off like a storm. You may find yourself speaking with a sharpness you vowed never to use. You may watch yourself shut down when conflict arises, the same way you watched her disappear behind her own pain. You may find yourself dismissing your own feelings, telling yourself to get over it, echoing the very phrases that once diminished you. And maybe you've wondered, why can't I stop? Why do I feel like I'm living the same story in a different chapter? It's because no one taught you how to do it differently. You learned love through observation, through survival, through adaptation. You mimicked what was modeled even when it hurt, and somewhere along the way, that pain became normal. That dysfunction became familiar. That absence of warmth began to feel like home. So you chose people who gave you more of the same, partners who were distant, friends who didn't really see you, situations that made you earn love instead of receiving it freely. Because repetition isn't just about behavior, it's about belief. And if deep down you believe love is supposed to hurt, then you will keep chasing pain and calling it connection. But that mirror, the one that shows you what you're repeating, it's not there to shame you. It's there to awaken you. It's not accusing you. It's inviting you to look closely, to notice when the words leave your mouth and land like stones, to pause when you feel the urge to shut down, push away, raise your voice, or disappear, to recognize that what was done to you is not what you have to continue doing to others or to yourself. The hardest work you will ever do is choosing to respond differently when your whole body wants to do what it's always done. To stay calm when your muscles remember rage. To be gentle when your voice wants to go sharp. To listen when you were taught to dismiss. To hold space when all you knew was space being taken away. Breaking the cycle isn't about perfection. It's about presence. About catching yourself in the act, not to punish, but to understand, to trace the origin of the behavior and say, it stops here. I will not pass this down. Maybe no one modeled softness for you. Maybe you never saw apology or emotional safety or open arms. Then let you be the first. You are the first in the line to step out of the shadow and into the light. The first to say, this pain ends with me. The first to name it, own it, rewrite it, And yes, it will feel unfamiliar. It may even feel wrong at first because trauma teaches us to be loyal to what is known, not to what is good. But you are not bound to become what broke you. You are not doomed to wear your mother's mask, your father's voice, your family's silence. You have the power to choose again, and that mirror, though it reflects the past, can also reveal a future. One where you speak with kindness, not because it was taught to you, but because you taught it to yourself. One where your children or your partners or your inner child no longer have to inherit the ghosts that once raised you. The mirror shows you the repetition, but you, beloved, are the one who decides whether it continues. There is a grief that lives beneath the skin, one that has no ceremony, no eulogy, no name written in flowers. It does not come with casseroles or condolence cards. Because how do you mourn someone who is still alive? How do you grieve a mother who never left but never fully arrived? This grief is quiet. It walks with you in the hallways of memory, brushing against your shoulder when you hear her voice, when you see another mother cradle her child the way you wish to be cradled. It stirs when someone says, "She did her best," as if love can only be measured by effort and not impact. It rises when you realize that what you needed never came, not in the way your spirit cried out for, and that is a loss. You needed softness, but were handed silence. You needed reassurance, but were given rules. You needed a mother who asked how you felt, not just what you achieved. You needed warmth that wasn't earned through obedience or perfection, but offered freely, simply because you existed. You needed to be held, not fixed, listened to, not dismissed, protected, not made to be the protector. But she gave you what she could from where she stood, and maybe her hands were full of her own grief, her own unmet needs. Maybe no one mothered her. Maybe her heart was armored by survival. Still, you were the child, and you needed more. This kind of grief is not clean. It's not like the kind that follows death. It doesn't come in stages. It comes in waves, unexpected, uninvited, unrelenting. It hits you in your adult years, in your parenting, in your friendships, in your therapy sessions, in your deepest joy when you feel an ache that says, "She never saw this version of me. She never saw me at all." You may have tried to earn her love by being good, by being smart, by being quiet, by being useful. You may have waited years for her to say what your soul needed to hear. But the truth of grief is that some words never come. Some apologies never find their way past pride. Some people never learn the language of affection, even when they live their whole lives trying. And so you mourn, not just the mother you had, but the mother you hoped she would become. You grieve the bedtime stories she never told, the days she didn't notice your sadness, the phone calls that ended with advice instead of understanding. You grieve the absence of gentleness, the way she made your needs feel like burdens, the way her love came with a price, a look, a tone, a silence that said, "You're too much." There is a child inside you still waiting, not for revenge, not for justice, just to be seen. That child has learned to perform, to overfunction, to please, to protect others. But underneath it all, there is a tender, aching hope. Maybe one day she'll change. Maybe one day she'll say sorry. Maybe one day she'll see me. But some mothers never see beyond themselves. Some never learn to say, "I'm sorry," or "I was wrong," or "I hurt you." And clinging to that hope becomes another layer of pain. There is no healing in denial. There is only delay. You do not have to hate her to grieve her. You do not have to villainize her to mourn what she was not. You can hold compassion for her story and still make space for your sorrow. Because grief is not about blame. Grief is about truth. It is saying, "I needed more, and I didn't get it, and that absence shaped me." And when you finally allow yourself to feel that grief, not judge it, not push it away, not shrink from it, you begin to reclaim what was lost. You begin to mother yourself, to become the soft place you never had, to speak kindly to the wound she left unnamed, to wrap your own arms around the child she never truly held. You begin to tell the truth, not because it's easy, but because it's yours. Because healing doesn't come from rewriting the past, but from releasing the parts of it that you've been carrying alone. And so you grieve, not to stay in sadness, but to move through it. Not to punish her, but to free yourself. Because grief, when honored, becomes grace. And from that grace, you begin again. There is a lie that lingers in the hearts of many, one passed down like a family heirloom, wrapped not in gold, but in silence. It says, if you speak your truth, you are being ungrateful. If you remember the harm, you are being dramatic. If you seek healing, you are being disrespectful. And so you learn to swallow your pain whole, to bury your questions, to rewrite your memories into something more palatable. You tell yourself it wasn't that bad. Others had it worse. She tried her best. And while all those things may be true, so is this. You were hurt. And healing from that hurt does not mean you are dishonoring her. It means you are honoring yourself. You were taught to protect her image, even if it meant sacrificing your own truth. Taught to bite your tongue when your voice trembled with the weight of unsaid things. Taught to smile in public and cry in private. To call it love, even when it felt like fear. To stay loyal to the woman who raised you, even if that loyalty required abandoning parts of yourself. But there comes a time when the silence becomes heavier than the truth, a time when pretending becomes its own kind of wound, and your spirit, tired of the performance, begins to whisper, tell the truth, speak the pain, name what was lost. And when you do, when you say out loud, I was hurt, I wasn't seen, I wasn't nurtured the way I needed to be, the world might call it betrayal. But let them talk, let them say what they will, because your healing was never meant to make others comfortable. Your healing is not a courtroom. You are not on trial for telling your story. You are not disrespecting your mother by facing what she could not give you. You are not disgracing your family by naming the ache that's lived in your chest for decades. You are not dishonoring your roots by pruning the branches that bear only pain. You are choosing life, full, honest, beautiful life, and that requires truth. That requires courage. Disrespect is cruelty. Disrespect is revenge. Disrespect is mockery. Healing is none of those things. Healing is a return to yourself, to your voice, to the little one inside you who spent too long waiting for permission to be heard. And hear me now, you do not need her permission to heal. You do not need her apology to begin again. You do not need to wait for her to understand before you step into your own understanding. Maybe she will never get it. Maybe she will never say the words you longed for. Maybe she will shrink from your truth, twist it, deny it, try to silence it. And that will hurt. Oh, how it will hurt. But that is not a reason to turn away from yourself again. You are allowed to heal, even if she never sees the need. You are allowed to grow, even if she insists you are already fine. You are allowed to rise, even if she clings to the version of you that kept quiet to keep the peace. You are not the same child who once needed her approval to feel safe. You are not that small anymore. You have grown. And with growth comes the sacred right to choose truth over tradition, freedom over fear, and healing over pretending. The ones who understand will never call your healing an insult. They will call it bravery. They will call it survival. They will call it the first breath after a lifetime of holding it in. So speak. Speak the truth, even if your voice shakes, even if others look away, even if the past resists. Because this path you walk is not about revenge, it is about liberation. It is not disrespect to remember the whole story. It is not betrayal to say, this part hurt me. It is not disgraceful to choose yourself. Your healing is the most sacred form of self-respect. And any love that demands silence is not love at all. You can honor where you came from while still building something better. You can hold both, love for her and love for the self you are still becoming. You can carry the lessons and leave behind the wounds. And in doing so, you do not diminish her. You simply refuse to diminish yourself. My dear, you do not owe silence to the pain that shaped you. You owe truth to the child you once were and healing to the adult you are becoming. Look at the wound, speak its name, grieve the mother who could not be, and then rise. Rise into the mothering of yourself. Rise into the love you were always worthy of.